The restaurant buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but my world shattered in a single sentence. "You're nothing but a pathetic old woman clinging to a family that doesn't need you," Sarah spat, her voice slicing through the chatter like a blade. My son, David, sat frozen beside her, his eyes glued to the table as I felt the sting of her words burn my cheeks. It was our family's annual dinner, a tradition I'd cherished for decades. My late husband's favorite way to gather our children and their spouses. I'd spent hours planning this evening at La Bella Vita, a cozy Italian place in town, envisioning warmth and connection. Instead, Sarah, my son's wife of 3 years, had turned it into a battlefield. Her sharp tongue, always teetering on cruel, had finally crossed a line. The room didn't stop. Waiters still weaved through tables and other families laughed. But to me, it felt like the air had been sucked out. I'm Margaret, 58, a mother of 2 and a widow who spent the last 10 years rebuilding a life after losing my husband, Tom. David, my eldest, had always been my rock, but since marrying Sarah, he'd grown distant. I'd ignored the signs, her subtle jabs at my cooking, her eye rolls when I shared stories of David's childhood. Tonight, though, her venom was public, deliberate, and aimed to wound. "You act like you're still the queen of this family," she continued, her lips curling. "David's moved on. Why can't you?" I clutched the edge of my chair, my knuckles whitening. The other guests, my daughter Emily, her husband Mark, and a few cousins, stared in awkward silence. Emily reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my heart pounding. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but something deeper stirred. A memory, a whisper of something I discovered weeks ago. Sarah's secret, the one she thought was buried, started a month earlier, innocently enough. I'd been helping David sort through old boxes in their garage, a favor Sarah begrudgingly allowed. Among the clutter, I found a small, locked diary, its leather cover worn but elegant. Curiosity got the better of me. I'm not proud of it, but I picked the lock. Inside were entries, meticulous and chilling, detailing Sarah's affair with a coworker, a married man named Greg. She wrote of their stolen moments, her thrill at deceiving David, and her plans to leave once she'd secured enough money from their joint account. My hands trembled as I read, torn between exposing her and protecting my son's heart. Back at the restaurant, Sarah's smug expression fueled my resolve. I'd kept her secret, hoping she'd change, but her cruelty tonight was the final straw. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside, "you don't get to rewrite this family's story." Her eyes narrowed, sensing a shift. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing the photograph I'd printed from a screenshot in her diary. A blurry but undeniable image of her and Greg, tangled in an embrace. I hadn't planned to use it, but her attack left me no choice. "Margaret, don't," David whispered, his voice breaking. He knew something was coming, though not what. I stood, my legs trembling, and faced the table. "You think you can humiliate me?" I said, locking eyes with Sarah. "Let's talk about who's really pathetic." I slid the photograph across the table, its glossy surface catching the light. Sarah's face drained of color, her confidence crumbling like ash. The room didn't fall silent, not yet, but the weight of that moment hung heavy, a prelude to the chaos to come. Emily gasped, Mark leaned forward, and the cousins exchanged glances. Sarah's hand shot out to snatch the photo, but I was faster, holding it up for all to see. "This," I said, my voice rising, "is your daughter-in-law with another man, a married man." The words landed like a thunderclap, and now, the restaurant's hum began to fade. Waiters paused, and nearby tables turned to stare. Sarah's lips parted, but no sound came. David's face twisted with betrayal, his eyes darting between me and his wife. "Mom, what is this?" he choked out. I hated the pain in his voice, but I couldn't stop now. "It's the truth, David," I said softly. "I found her diary. She's been lying to you for months." Sarah's chair scraped back as she stood, her voice shrill. This is a lie. She's fabricating this to turn you against me. But the photograph was undeniable. Greg's face, his arm around her, the timestamp from a hotel security camera. It was all there. I'd done my homework, cross-referencing her diary with public records, even tracking down Greg's wife, Laura, who deserved to know. Laura and I had met in secret, two women bound by betrayal, planning our next move. But tonight, this was mine alone. "Sit down, Sarah," I said, my voice cold. "You don't get to run from this." She froze, her bravado crumbling under the weight of her own lies. The restaurant's chatter had all but stopped now, eyes fixed on our table. Emily's hand found mine again, and this time, I let her hold it. David's gaze was distant, his world unraveling. I wanted to comfort him, but the truth had to come first. "You thought you could tear me down in front of my family?" I continued, my voice steady but laced with pain. "You thought you could mock me, humiliate me, and I just take it? I've spent my life holding this family together, and I won't let you destroy it." Sarah's eyes glistened, but not with remorse. Anger, maybe fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "Don't. You've said enough." The silence that followed was deafening. David's hands shook as he picked up the photograph, his jaw tight. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah's silence was answer enough. I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. Exposing her had cost me, too. My son's trust, perhaps, or the illusion of a perfect family. But I'd protected him, and that was enough for now. As the restaurant's noise slowly returned, I knew this was only the beginning. Sarah's secret was out, but the fallout would ripple through our lives. Laura, Greg's wife, was waiting for her moment, and I'd promised to stand with her. Together, we'd ensure Sarah and Greg faced the consequences of their choices. But for now, I sat back down, my heart heavy but unbowed, ready to face whatever came next. The aftermath of that night at La Bella Vita clung to me like damp fog. David didn't speak to me for days, his silence louder than Sarah's venom had been. I sat in my quiet living room, staring at the framed photo of Tom and me on our wedding day, wondering if I'd done the right thing. Exposing Sarah had felt like justice, but the cost was etched in my son's distant eyes. David called on the fourth day, his voice raw. "Mom, we need to talk." He asked to meet at the park near my house, a place we used to visit when he was a boy, tossing breadcrumbs to ducks. I arrived early, the autumn leaves crunching under my boots. My heart knotted with dread. When he appeared, his face was gaunt, his wedding ring glinting in the pale sunlight. Sarah wasn't with him. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, sitting on a bench, his hands clasped tightly. I wanted to hug him, to erase his pain, but I stayed still, choosing my words carefully. "I wanted to protect you, David. I thought maybe she'd stop. Maybe she'd choose you." His laugh was bitter, hollow. "She didn't. She's been lying to me for months, and I was too blind to see it." I told him about the diary, the meticulous entries, the way Sarah had documented her betrayal with a kind of pride. I confessed to meeting Laura, Greg's wife, a soft-spoken woman in her 40s whose world had also been shattered. Laura had found her own evidence, texts, receipts, a hotel booking, and together we'd pieced together the affair's timeline. David listened, his jaw tightening with each detail, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he stared at the pond, the ducks gliding unaware. "I'm filing for divorce," he said finally, the words heavy but resolute. My heart ached for him, but relief flickered, too. He deserved better than Sarah's lies. "I'm here for you," I said, reaching for his hand. He let me hold it, just for a moment before pulling away. "I need time, Mom. It's a lot." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I'd exposed Sarah, but I couldn't shield him from the fallout. That evening, I met Laura at a coffee shop, a small place with mismatched mugs and warm lighting. She looked as weary as I felt, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. I confronted Greg, she said, stirring her latte absently. He denied it at first, but I had proof. He's moving out. Her voice cracked, and I reached across the table, offering the same comfort I'd wanted to give David. We were strangers bound by shared pain, allies in a war we hadn't chosen. Laura and I planned our next steps. Sarah and Greg thought they could slink away, start fresh, but we weren't done. Laura had found a lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen who specialized in messy divorces. Karen suggested we gather more evidence, financial records, emails, anything to strengthen our case. I'd already hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Paul, who'd tracked Sarah's movements for weeks. His report was damning. Late-night meetings, secret bank transfers, even a lease for an apartment Sarah hadn't told David about. The investigator's photos burned in my mind. Sarah laughing with Greg in a dimly lit bar, her hand on his arm, oblivious to the lens capturing her betrayal. I shared them with Laura, who nodded grimly. "We'll use this," she said. "They don't get to walk away unscathed." Her determination mirrored mine, a fire kindled by betrayal. We agreed to confront Sarah and Greg together, a united front to expose their lies to everyone they knew. Back home, Emily called, her voice thick with worry. "Mom, are you okay? David's a mess, and Sarah's been posting cryptic stuff online, acting like the victim." I checked Sarah's social media, my stomach twisting at her vague posts about toxic in-laws and starting over. She was spinning the narrative, painting me as the villain. I wanted to scream, to post the truth for all to see, but Laura's advice echoed, "Don't play her game. Let the evidence speak." The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page, typed and signed. "You'll regret this, Margaret. Back off or I'll make sure David hates you forever." The words chilled me, but I recognized Sarah's desperation. She knew her world was crumbling. I called Paul, the investigator, and handed over the letter. "Find out if she sent this," I said. He nodded, slipping it into an evidence bag. "She's sloppy," he said. "This'll be easy." Days later, Paul confirmed the letter came from a print shop near Sarah's office. Security footage showed her there, paying in cash. It wasn't enough for a legal charge, but it was another piece of the puzzle. I shared it with Laura, who added it to our growing file. We were building a case not just for divorce but for accountability. Sarah and Greg had hurt our families, and we'd make sure they faced the consequences. As the week ended, David texted me a photo of him and his sister at the park, the same one we'd met at. "We're okay, Mom," he wrote. "Thank you." Tears pricked my eyes. I'd exposed Sarah's secret, but I hadn't lost my son. Not yet. The road ahead would be rough. Divorce, confrontations, maybe even court, but I felt a quiet strength. Laura and I were in this together, and Sarah's lies wouldn't outlast our truth. The air in Laura's living room was thick with tension as we spread documents across her coffee table. Photos, bank statements, the diary entries I'd photographed before returning the book to Sarah's garage. Laura's hands shook as she sorted through the evidence, her wedding ring glinting, a reminder of her own broken vows. "This is enough, right?" she asked, her voice a mix of hope and dread. I nodded. "It's more than enough." Our plan was simple but ruthless. Confront Sarah and Greg at a public event, where their lies couldn't hide. Greg's company was hosting a charity gala in 2 days, a glitzy affair attended by colleagues, friends, and clients. Laura had an invitation as his wife, and I'd secured one through a cousin who worked at the venue. We'd walk in together, armed with our evidence, and let the truth do the rest. I spent the next day preparing, my stomach churning with nerves. Emily came over, her face pale but determined. "I'm coming with you," she said. "David needs me there, too." I hesitated. This wasn't her fight, but her fierce loyalty swayed me. "Okay," I said, "but stay close." She hugged me, her embrace a reminder of the family I was fighting for. David hadn't spoken since our park meeting, but Emily assured me he was processing, leaning on her for support. The night of the gala arrived, the venue a glittering sea of chandeliers and tuxedos. I wore a navy dress, simple but elegant, my silver hair swept back to Project Confidence. Laura, in emerald green, looked regal despite the shadows under her eyes. Emily, at my side, clutched a folder with our evidence, her jaw set. We spotted Sarah first, in a red gown, laughing with Greg near the bar. Their ease, their arrogance, fueled my resolve. Laura took the lead, her voice steady as she approached. "Greg, Sarah, we need to talk." Heads turned, the crowd sensing drama. Sarah's smile faltered, her eyes darting to me. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" she hissed. I stepped forward, holding up a photo, the same one from the restaurant. "We're here to finish what you started," I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Greg's face reddened. "Laura, this isn't the place," he began, but Laura cut him off, tossing a stack of printed texts onto a nearby table. "Really, Greg? Because these say otherwise." The crowd murmured, drawn to the scene. Emily handed me the diary copies, and I read aloud, my voice clear. March 12th. Greg and I met at the hotel again. David suspects nothing. Gasps rippled through the room. Sarah lunged for the papers, but Emily blocked her, fierce and unyielding. "You don't get to hide this," Emily said. Greg's colleagues stared, some whispering, others pulling out phones. Laura continued, her voice breaking but strong. "You betrayed our families. You thought you could ruin us and walk away." She held up bank records, showing transfers Sarah had made to a secret account, money stolen from David. The room was silent now, the music a distant hum. Sarah's eyes glistened with tears, but I saw no remorse, only panic. Greg tried to usher her away, but a woman in a suit, Greg's boss, I later learned, stepped forward. "Is this true?" she asked, her tone icy. Laura handed her the evidence, and the woman's face hardened. "We'll discuss this Monday, Greg," she said, walking away. David arrived then, his face ashen but composed. He'd come at Emily's urging, needing to see the truth for himself. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, "it's over." She turned to him, pleading. "David, please, she's lying." But he shook his head, walking away, Emily at his side. I watched, my heart breaking for him but proud of his strength. Laura and I stood together as the crowd dispersed, some casting sympathetic glances, others avoiding our eyes. Sarah and Greg slunk out, their reputations in tatters. I felt no joy, only a weary satisfaction. We'd exposed their lies, but the victory was bittersweet. Laura squeezed my hand. "We did it," she whispered. I nodded, but my thoughts were with David, wondering how we'd heal from this. As we left the gala, a man approached, Paul, the investigator. "I found something else," he said, handing me a USB drive. "Sarah's been in touch with a lawyer, trying to hide assets." My stomach sank. The fight wasn't over. But with Laura and Emily by my side, and David slowly returning to me, I knew we'd face it together. The USB drive from Paul felt like a ticking bomb in my purse. Back at home, I plugged it into my laptop, Laura and Emily peering over my shoulders. The files revealed Sarah's latest move, emails to a lawyer about transferring David's inheritance. Money Tom had left him, into an offshore account. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just cheating. She was trying to steal his future. "We need to act fast," Laura said, her voice sharp with urgency. She'd been through this with Greg, who'd hidden assets before their divorce. We called Karen, the lawyer, who agreed to meet us the next morning. "Bring everything," she said. "We'll freeze those accounts before she can touch them." I barely slept that night, haunted by Sarah's audacity and David's pain. Karen's office was stark, all glass and steel, but her presence was warm, commanding. She reviewed the USB files, her brow furrowing. "This is fraud," she said. "Sarah's lawyer is shady, but sloppy. We can file an emergency injunction." She outlined our plan. Protect David's assets, expose Sarah's scheme in court, and ensure Greg faced similar scrutiny. Laura nodded, her jaw tight. "Let's bury them," she said, a spark of vengeance in her eyes. I called David, dreading the conversation. He answered on the second ring, his voice flat. "Mom, what now?" I told him about the accounts, the lawyer, the injunction. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. "How did I miss this?" he whispered finally. "You trusted her," I said. "That's not your fault." He agreed to meet Karen, a small step toward rebuilding. The injunction hearing was set for a week later, giving us time to gather more evidence. Paul, the investigator, worked overtime, uncovering Sarah's paper trail, fake receipts, forged signatures, even a second phone she'd used to contact Greg. Laura found similar evidence against her husband, their schemes mirroring each other's. "They planned this together," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "They thought they'd outsmart us." Emily took charge of supporting David, who'd moved into her guest room. She cooked his favorite meals, dragged him to therapy, and kept me updated. "He's hurting, Mom, but he's strong," she said. I clung to her words, praying they were true. Meanwhile, I met Laura daily, our bond deepening. We weren't just allies. We were friends, united by a shared fight for justice. The hearing arrived, a gray morning that matched my mood. The courtroom was small, the judge a stern woman with sharp eyes. Sarah sat across from us, her face pale, her lawyer fidgeting. Greg was there too, avoiding Laura's gaze. Karen presented our case. The diary, the photos, the bank records, the USB files. The judge's expression didn't change, but her questions to Sarah's lawyer were pointed. "Explain these transfers," she demanded. He stammered, unprepared. David testified, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I trusted her," he said, glancing at Sarah. "She betrayed me, my family, everything." Sarah's eyes stayed on the floor, her silence damning. Laura spoke next, her testimony mirroring David's. Calm, factual, devastating. The judge granted the injunction, freezing Sarah's accounts pending a full investigation. It was a victory, but the war wasn't over. Outside the courthouse, Sarah approached me, her face twisted with rage. "You've ruined my life," she hissed. I met her gaze, unflinching. "You did that yourself," I said. She stormed off, Greg trailing behind her like a shadow. Laura hugged me, her relief palpable. "One step closer," she said. David joined us, his expression unreadable. "Thanks, Mom," he said softly. It was enough. That night, Emily hosted a small dinner at her house, just me, David, Mark, and her. It felt like a fragile echo of our old family gatherings, but it was a start. David smiled once, a flicker of the boy I'd raised. As I drove home, I thought of Tom, wishing he could see us fighting for each other. Sarah's secret was exposed, her plans thwarted, but the healing would take time. I was ready for it. The weeks after the injunction were a blur of legal meetings and quiet evenings with David. He was staying with Emily, rebuilding his life piece by piece. Sarah had vanished from social media, her cryptic posts replaced by silence. But I knew she wasn't done. She was too cunning to give up. Paul, the investigator, warned me she'd been spotted meeting her lawyer at a diner, whispering urgently over coffee. Laura and I kept in close touch, our coffee shop meetings now a ritual. She'd filed for divorce, and Greg was fighting it, claiming he was the victim. "He's delusional," she said, sipping her latte, her eyes fierce. I admired her strength. She'd lost as much as I had, yet she kept pushing forward. We shared updates from Karen, who was preparing for the divorce hearings. "Sarah's fighting dirty," Karen said. "She's accusing David of emotional abuse to deflect." The accusation hit like a punch. David, abusive? The boy who'd spent his childhood helping me garden, who'd cried when his goldfish died. I wanted to confront Sarah myself, but Karen urged restraint. "She's desperate," she said. Let her dig her own grave. So we focused on evidence, digging deeper into Sarah's finances. Paul found a hidden account in her name, linked to Greg's company. The money trail was clear. They'd been siphoning funds for months. Emily took the lead on protecting David's mental health. She enrolled him in a support group for betrayed spouses, where he found solace in shared stories. He's opening up, she told me, her voice hopeful. I visited him at her house, bringing his favorite lemon cake. He hugged me, a real hug, the first in weeks. I'm sorry I pulled away, Mom, he said. I brushed it off, but my heart swelled. We were finding our way back. Laura and I decided to take our fight public, not with drama, but with truth. Greg's company had a board meeting coming up, and Laura had a contact on the inside. We sent them an anonymous packet. Emails, photos, bank records, all proving Greg's involvement in the affair and the fraud. This could cost him his job, Laura said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. I nodded. He deserves it. The board meeting's fallout came fast. Greg was suspended pending an investigation, his reputation in shreds. Laura called me, her voice triumphant. They're auditing everything, she said. He's panicking. Sarah, too, was unraveling. Paul caught her trying to sell her car for quick cash, likely to fund her legal fees. She was running out of moves. David's divorce hearing loomed, and I dreaded it. He'd have to face Sarah in court, relive the betrayal. The night before, we sat in Emily's backyard, the stars bright above us. I loved her, Mom, he said, his voice breaking. How do I trust again? I took his hand, my own eyes stinging. You trust yourself first, I said. You're stronger than you know. He nodded, and for the first time, I saw a spark of hope in his eyes. The hearing was brutal. Sarah's lawyer painted her as a victim, twisting David's kindness into neglect. But Karen was relentless, presenting the diary, the photos, the financial records. The judge, the same stern woman from the injunction, wasn't swayed by Sarah's tears. This court values evidence, not theatrics, she said. David's testimony was quiet but powerful, detailing Sarah's lies and manipulation. When he finished, Sarah wouldn't meet his eyes. The judge awarded David the house and most of their joint assets, citing Sarah's fraud. It was a victory, but David looked hollow as we left the courthouse. Emily and I flanked him, a silent promise of support. Laura was waiting outside, her own hearing set for the next day. We're almost there, she said, hugging me. I felt the weight of our shared fight, but also its purpose. That night, I found a voicemail from Sarah, her voice slurred with anger or alcohol. You think you've won, Margaret? This isn't over. I saved it, sent it to Paul, and went to bed, unafraid. She could threaten all she wanted, her secrets were out, and we were stronger than her lies. Sarah's voicemail haunted me, not because I feared her, but because it reminded me how far she'd fallen. Once, I'd welcomed her into our family, hoping she'd be the partner David deserved. Now, she was a stranger, her choices a web of deceit that had ensnared us all. I played the voicemail for Laura, who shook her head. She's desperate, she said. Desperate people make mistakes. Karen, our lawyer, agreed. She used the voicemail to request a restraining order, citing Sarah's threatening tone. The judge granted it, another blow to Sarah's crumbling facade. Meanwhile, Laura's divorce hearing went smoothly. Greg's suspension from his company weakened his case, and Laura walked away with their home and half their assets. She called me that night, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard. I'm free, she said. Now let's make sure David is. David was healing slowly. He'd started working again, throwing himself into his job as a graphic designer. Emily reported he was sketching late into the night, his art a way to process the pain. I visited him, bringing old photo albums to remind him of happier times. We laughed over pictures of him as a boy, covered in mud from a soccer game. You were always resilient, I told him. He smiled, a real smile, and I felt a flicker of hope. Paul, the investigator, uncovered one last piece of evidence. A recorded call between Sarah and Greg, plotting to flee the state with their hidden funds. The call was intercepted by a contact at Greg's company who'd grown suspicious of his behavior. Paul handed me the audio file, his face grim. "This could seal their fate," he said. I listened, my heart pounding as Sarah's voice, cold and calculated, detailed their escape plan. Laura and I met with Karen to strategize. The audio was gold, proof of conspiracy to commit fraud. Karen filed it with the court, pushing for criminal charges. "This isn't just divorce anymore," she said. "They've crossed into illegal territory." The thought of Sarah in jail felt surreal, but I wanted justice, not revenge. For David, for Laura, for our families. The criminal hearing was set for a month later, giving us time to prepare. I focused on David, inviting him to family dinners, small gatherings with Emily and Mark. He was quiet but present, his laughter rare but genuine. One night, he showed me a sketch, a portrait of me, strong and serene, titled The Anchor. Tears stung my eyes. "You're our rock, Mom," he said. I hugged him, vowing to live up to that image. Laura, meanwhile, was rebuilding her life. She'd started a book club, a small act of defiance against the isolation Greg's betrayal had caused. I joined, finding solace in the stories we read, tales of resilience and redemption. Our friendship deepened, a silver lining in the chaos. We talked about the future, about healing, about never letting betrayal define us. The day of the criminal hearing arrived, a cold morning that matched the mood. Sarah and Greg sat together, their faces drawn, their lawyers scrambling. Karen presented the audio, the emails, the bank records, irrefutable proof of their scheme. The prosecutor was relentless, painting them as calculating opportunists. Sarah's eyes met mine once, filled with defiance, but I saw the fear beneath it. The judge didn't hesitate. Sarah and Greg were charged with fraud and conspiracy, their bail set high. They'd face trial, but the evidence was overwhelming. As they were led away, Laura squeezed my hand. "We did this," she said. I nodded, but my thoughts were with David, waiting outside. He didn't need to see Sarah in handcuffs. He needed to move forward. That evening, we gathered at Emily's, a quiet celebration of survival. David raised a glass, his voice steady. "To family," he said, looking at me. I smiled, my heart full. Sarah's secrets had torn us apart, but we'd rebuilt, stronger than before. The fight wasn't over, but we were ready for whatever came next. The trial loomed, a dark cloud over our fragile recovery. Sarah and Greg faced charges that could send them to prison, but I found no joy in their downfall, only a quiet resolve to see this through. David was stronger now, his sketches filling with color, his laughter more frequent. Yet, I knew the courtroom would reopen wounds we'd barely begun to heal. Laura and I prepared with Karen, who warned us the defense would be aggressive. "They'll try to discredit you," she said. "Stay calm. Stick to the truth." I nodded, clutching the locket Tom had given me, a reminder of the strength I'd drawn from love. Laura, too, was ready, her book club now a lifeline of support, her friends rallying around her. The trial began on a rainy Monday, the courtroom packed with reporters and curious onlookers. Sarah looked gaunt, her confidence replaced by a hollow stare. Greg sat beside her, his tie crooked, his eyes avoiding Laura's. The prosecution opened with the audio, Sarah's voice echoing through the room, detailing their plan to flee. Jurors leaned forward, their faces grim. Karen called me to the stand first. I recounted finding the diary, the photos, the letter Sarah sent. The defense lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, tried to paint me as a vengeful mother-in-law. "You invaded her privacy," he said, his tone accusatory. I met his gaze, my voice steady. "I protected my son from her lies." The jurors nodded, and I felt a spark of hope. Laura's testimony was equally powerful, her voice breaking as she described Greg's betrayal. David didn't testify, he didn't need to. The evidence spoke for him. Bank records, emails, the diary. Sarah's lawyer tried to spin her as a victim, trapped in a loveless marriage, but the jury wasn't swayed. The audio was damning, her own words her undoing. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Sarah and Greg were sentenced to 5 years each, with fines they couldn't pay. As they were led away, Sarah's eyes met mine, not with anger but with resignation. I felt no triumph, only relief. The truth had won, but at a cost, years of pain, trust shattered. David moved back into his house, now his alone. He invited me over, showing me a new sketch, a family portrait with me, Emily, Mark, and him smiling under a bright sun. "This is us now," he said. I hugged him, tears falling. We'd lost so much, but we'd gained something, too. A deeper bond, forged in fire. Laura and I celebrated quietly, sharing wine at her house. She'd started dating a kind man from her book club, and her laughter was infectious. "We're survivors," she said, clinking her glass against mine. I smiled, thinking of Tom, of David, of the family we'd fought to save. Sarah's humiliation had sparked this journey, but our resilience had defined it. Months later, David threw a small party, a new tradition to replace the old. Emily and Mark were there, along with Laura and her new partner. We laughed, shared stories, and danced to Tom's favorite jazz records. David pulled me aside, his eyes clear. "You saved me, Mom," he said. I shook my head. We saved each other. As I drove home, the stars bright above, I thought of Sarah's words at the restaurant, meant to break me. They hadn't. Instead, they'd unleashed a strength I hadn't known I had. I'd exposed her secret, silenced her lies, and rebuilt my family. The room had fallen silent that night, but now, it was filled with love, louder than ever.